Sudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Mishra Krishna Brishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swamite Namare. Namo Mishra Krishna Brishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamite Namare. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunamari Paschati Nishatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita-vada Shivasadi Gauravata Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama. So, Hare Krishna, welcome back to the third day of our study of Vedanta Syamantaka. So, in the last 2 days, we have been discussing about the authorship of Vedanta Syamantaka and also basic introduction to Vedanta study. So, although a devotee's life is regulated according to Vedantic principles, but technically Vedanta and quotations from Upanishads, studying the technical aspects is not our day-to-day practice. But we have been seeing that how Vedanta study is actually important for a devotee to fix himself up in the practices of pure devotional service. And we also discussed yesterday several different aspects of Vedantic study. And actually speaking, we have still not entered into the book at all. We have not even seen the introduction to that book yet. We have been introducing or we have been discussing only the Vedantic principles till now. And yesterday, we stopped at this verse, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. So, and we discussed that vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha, it's although not claimed as a Paribhasha Sutra for all Vedantic study, but the way Acharyas have employed this particular verse from Krishna, it suggests that this is the driving factor or this is the defining factor which overarches all the other statements of Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra. So it has to be understood in that perspective. At the start of the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada writes that if one has to understand Bhagavad Gita properly, one should at least theoretically have this conviction that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And with that conviction, if one studies Bhagavad Gita, then everything would start making sense. So that is required. Similarly, for our Vedantic study also, now if you see, we have been discussing this and we have already stated several statements where vedais sarvair ahame vedyaha. From all the Vedas, Krishna is to be known. From all Vedantic study, Krishna is to be known. So, at least theoretically, we should have this faith. Of course, devotees will have this faith, but those who are watching online, we should have theoretically this understanding that this is what Krishna speaks in the 15th chapter, and it is Krishna who is to be known from all the Vedic literatures. With that understanding, we should approach these Vedantic principles, the Vedanta study. Impersonalists, what they do, they also follow a similar pattern, but then they do not accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They already have this conception that everything is impersonal, everything is Advaitic, and with that frame set, with that mindset, with that frame of mind, they approach the Upanishadic statements, the Vedantic study. So because of that, everything becomes convoluted for them. Now, when I say this, it does not mean that depending upon our perception, then Vedanta should be studied. So one can imagine that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if he studies Vedanta through that, then he will get satisfied with that. And if one imagines that the Supreme Absolute Truth is impersonal and he studies the Vedantic scriptures through that, then he will also attain the ultimate destination. That is not the point. The point is that Vedanta study or Upanishads themselves have a particular goal in mind. Okay, and our Acharyas and the way it is explained is that the goal is already set. The goal is set. This is the goal. And with that goal in mind, if we study the Vedic scriptures, everything harmonizes. This is called samanvaya. So everything harmonizes in that way. But impersonalistic understanding or Advaita approach to Vedantic study is different. Because although they have this impersonal conception in mind, and through that, when they approach the Upanishadic statements, then they have lots of word jugglery. So that we will see. Now here also, if you see, this sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishtaha mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedesha sarvair vedya vedantakrit vedavid eva chaham. So when I read this verse, it's so clear that from all the Vedic literatures, it's Krishna who is to be known. How do the Mayavadis interpret it? How do the Vedanta, how the so-called Advaita-Vedanta? I was curious to know. So I looked at some commentaries, and how they say is they do not get into each and every word and try to find out its direct meaning. What they say is sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishtaha. No, because it's sarvasya, so therefore it refers to the impersonal Brahman. He's pervading everywhere, or to the Paramatma aspect of the Lord. And from him only all this knowledge, forgetfulness and everything else comes. So if we do upasana to him, then we will get true knowledge, and then we can transcend the Supreme Lord himself. Like that they interpret. And they say, vedais sarvair ahame vedyaha. And because in sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishtaha, they have already interpreted it as Brahman or Paramatma. When they say vedais sarvair ahame vedyaha, this aham becomes impersonal Brahman, or aham then becomes this Paramatma feature of the Lord. So that's interpretation. All these indirect interpretations are required to explain a very direct verse. So that's why when these statements are there, although Krishna says that he likes Parokshavad, but by the time he comes to the 15th chapter, he's directly speaking about himself. And it's there even from the 7th chapter onwards. In the first 6 chapters, he may not be directly speaking about himself, although he does sprinkle some concepts where he's directly addressing himself as the Supreme Lord. But when it comes to 7th chapter and onwards, then he's directly speaking, he's addressing himself as the Supreme Absolute Truth. So if we take the direct meaning, all the verses of Bhagavad Gita actually make sense. And if we see the Mayavadi interpretation, actually Shankaracharya did not comment on all the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita. He commented only on specific verses which he considered as important and which he thought would allow him to push through this impersonalistic understanding of the absolute truth. So he did not comment on all the verses at all. So he skipped some of those verses which are actually directly saying that Krishna is the absolute truth. So this is what they do. But if we see, sarvasya cha aham, there are already 2 words. Sarvasya is everything, of everything, and aham, then Krishna is addressing himself also. If everything is Brahman, then there is no need to speak 2 words at all. Correct? So there is sarvasyam, cha, aham. So there are 2 words, 2 people here. There is everything else, and then there is me. So sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha. I am situated in everyone's heart. Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. And from me only, knowledge, forgetfulness, and remembrance comes, he says. Now, if we have to understand that Krishna is not on the absolute level, then as Prabhupada says, then his instructions to Arjuna actually make no sense because both are on the same level. Krishna is not realized and Arjuna is also not realized, so there is no point of one becoming the instructor and another becoming the instructed. But if we understand that, okay, Krishna is on the topmost platform, but there also he is saying that at the topmost platform also, when I am from me only, this knowledge, remembrance and forgetfulness comes. Which basically means that there is duality there also. There are these qualities of remembrance, there are these qualities of forgetfulness, and there is this quality of knowledge. So which originates from Brahman. So if Brahman is completely homogeneous, it's completely impersonal, and there are no qualities associated with it, then how is it that from it originates knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness? So again, both the lines actually are defeating impersonalism here. Then finally, he says, vedais sarvair ahame vedyaha. From all the Vedic literatures, I am to be known. So again, he's using aham. And vedantakrit vedavid eva chaham. So Krishna is actually addressing himself in this verse, in these 4 lines, he's addressing himself 3 times. So there cannot be any impersonal interpretation to this verse at all. But still, they have, as we said, discussed, they have to do some word jugglery to basically do some from impersonal interpretation. So Vedanta study, although they have this concept in mind that through this impersonal attitude they will approach the scriptures, but they cannot reconcile such statements which are there in Bhagavad Gita, which is there in the Vedanta Sutras and the Upanishads. Whereas, now if we take the direct meaning, it's very clear. Vedais sarvair ahame vedyaha. And from that, if we approach the Upanishads, then everything becomes very clear. everything, all the so-called impersonalistic statements also become very, very coherent. They all become very clear. So today we are going to discuss, or mostly I'll be reading from Prabhupada's works, from his purports and from his lectures, because the introduction that we needed for Vedanta philosophy we have covered in the last 2 days. And we'll be reading through, most of the session today we'll be reading through, and here and there I'll put some comments, which have been provided to us by Srila Prabhupada, or as we have learned from the Acharyas. So this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 17, Madhya Lila, chapter 17, text 96, purport. And we'll see that each of these references that I'm taking, although they might look similar, but there's a specific aspect which Srila Prabhupada highlights in each of those. So it's not like all the references are repetitive in nature. Although it may seem repetitive, but there's a specific aspect which Srila Prabhupada points out. So Srila Prabhupada writes, actually Vedanta philosophy is meant for the devotees because in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. I am the compiler of Vedanta and I am the knower of the Vedas. Vyasadeva is an incarnation of Krishna and consequently Krishna is the compiler of Vedanta philosophy. Therefore, Krishna clearly knows the purport of Vedanta philosophy. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, whoever hears Vedanta philosophy from Krishna is actually aware of the real meaning of Vedanta. The Mayavadis call themselves Vedantists, but do not at all understand the purport of Vedanta philosophy. Not being properly educated, people in general think that Vedanta means the Shankarite interpretation. And this continues to this day also. So whenever we go out, most of the people are not interested in Vedanta. They're not even heard of Vedanta. But then to those people who are into Vedic culture, into Vedic study, we speak about Vedanta, it automatically falls into this category of Advaita-Vedanta. But then Advaita-Vedanta is just one branch, which is a misinterpretation of the Vedic literatures, of the Vedanta Sutras. So if we see, even if we see through numbers, there are 4 Vedanta commentaries, 4 Sampradayas which actually have commented on the Vedanta Sutra. And then there is only one line which is impersonalistic. Rest 4 are dualistic, or rest 4 are speaking about the supremacy of Lord Vishnu and devotion, eternal devotion to him. So even through just numbers, if we see out of 5, 80% of it, Vedantic discussion or Vedantic literature that is available is actually Vaishnavism only. It's actually the worship of Lord Vishnu. Whereas there's only one aspect of Vedanta, the misinterpretation, which is Advaita. But because people inherently have or do not want to surrender onto the Lord, right? We are here in this material world, people are here in this material world because we are inimical to surrender to Krishna. So this Advaitic interpretation gives them that mileage. It gives them that mileage which allows them to be in this material world, to enjoy this material world and somehow gain the satisfaction of Vedantic study also. I'm speaking about those people who are into this Vedic culture and Vedantic study. Most of the people here are karmis. Most of the people are into total sense gratification. So they do not even know what Vedanta is all about. Anyway, some quote we will see in which Srila Prabhupada actually says that everybody who has taken this human form of life must study Vedanta. So we'll see that. So this is what it is. People in general think that Vedanta means the Shankarite interpretation, but actually they do not understand the purport of Vedanta at all. So this is from Adi Lila, Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 128 purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the glories of Omkar are described as follows. Omityekaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran Yah Prayati Tejandeham Sayati Paramam Gatim. This verse indicates that Omkar or Pranava is a direct representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, if at the time of death one simply remembers Omkar, he remembers the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is therefore immediately transferred to the spiritual world. Now, again, the impersonalists, the Mayavadis, they give too much stress into this Omkar. But actually, if we say in this verse itself of Bhagavad Gita, Om ityekaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mam. Again, Krishna says, Mam. It's me who has to be meditated upon, Anusmaran. So, Om ityekaksharam Brahma. All this Om is referring to Brahma, and Vyaharan, I think it means hearing. One should hear this Om which represents Brahma, but then what he should do? He should do meditation upon Krishna. So whenever one chants Om, This is how he is supposed to chant Om. Om represents the absolute truth, the supreme absolute truth. But then one has to meditate upon Krishna when he's chanting, reciting this word, reciting this Omkar. Yah prayati tyajandeham sayati paramam gatim. So in that consciousness, if one leaves his body, then he attains the supreme destination. Sayati paramam gatim. Correct. And this also is corroborating the fact or the point that we discussed yesterday, that all the Vedic literatures are speaking only about Krishna. And they are not even speaking indirectly, they are speaking directly. Because Omkar is a representation of Krishna, the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. And all the Vedic mantras from Shruti, whatever Vedic mantras we take, it all starts with Om. And Krishna says that in the 17th chapter also, that all the rituals that are performed in Vedic literatures, all the study that is done, all the regulations which has to be followed, all the mantras that are chanted, the sacrifices that are performed, it all should end with Om Tat Sat. I think it's in the 17th chapter. So Om Tat Sat is how it ends. And Om Tat Sat, all these three basically refer to Brahman. And here Krishna directly mentions that this Brahman is none but me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how can there be an impersonalistic interpretation? It's a mystery actually. But it's popular. That's how it is. So Prabhupada writes, Omkar is the basic principle of all Vedic mantras, for it is a representation of Lord Krishna, understanding of whom is the ultimate goal of the Vedas, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha. Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand these simple facts explained in the Bhagavad Gita, and yet they are very proud of being Vedantis. Sometimes, therefore, we refer to the Vedanti philosophers as Vedantis, those who do have no teeth. V means without, and Danti means possessing teeth. The statements of the Shankara philosophy, which are the teeth of the Mayavadi philosopher, are always broken by the strong arguments of Vaishnava philosophers such as the great Acharyas, especially Ramanujacharya. Shripad Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya break the teeth of the Mayavadi philosophers, who can therefore be called Vedantis or toothless. Then Srila Prabhupada says, is in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antilila, Chapter 2, text 95. A Vaishnava should study the commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra written by the four Sampradaya Acharyas, namely Sri Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami, and Nimbarka. For these commentaries are based upon the philosophy that the Lord is the Master and that all living entities are His eternal servants. One interested in studying Vedanta philosophy properly must study these commentaries, especially if he is a Vaishnava. These commentaries are always adored by Vaishnavas. Again, it's an imperative statement. It must be done. Vedanta study and Vedanta commentaries must be studied. Correct. So, this is pertinent. Although Srila Prabhupada writes that we have to study all the commentaries here, but for our benefit, for our purposes, Srila Prabhupada has presented all such arguments and commentaries within his purport itself. So when we read Srila Prabhupada's books, when he read his commentaries, then we are basically getting the essence of all these Vedanta Sutra commentaries from these four Acharyas. Correct. So, there's a small story. Okay, there's a small story in this regard. I don't know what the source is, but then it proves our point. So there was this Vaishnava, I've heard this a long time back. There was this Vaishnava temple. This Vaishnava temple had this huge temple, but there was a compound wall around that. And then, one Mayavadi came there, and then he was seeing all these devotees doing service, taking water from the well. Everybody was busy in serving the Lord. So this Mayavadi was not very impressed with what the devotees were doing. So, but then he did not want to go and fight with them also, like verbally that way. So what he did, he in the wall he wrote, this is not the proper understanding that you and the Lord are different and you are supposed to serve Him. We are all one. So he read daso'ham. Daso'ham. It's a very famous statement of the Mayavadis. Daso'ham means I am that. As he is, I am the same person. So he is Brahman, I am also Brahman. He is a Supreme Lord, I will also attain that supremacy. So daso'ham. And he went on his way. Then a devotee came and he saw that, no, who has written this? This is not proper. So this is not the proper philosophical understanding. So what he did, in front of that daso'ham, he just wrote a da. So then it becomes daso'ham. So I am the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is daso'ham. That is how it is. So then, okay, everything was fine. So after this, the next day, again the Mayavadi comes and he says that someone has changed what he has written. So he said, no, this is not proper. So I should do something else. So what he wrote a sa in front of that da. So then it becomes sada soham. So eternally I am the Supreme Lord. Eternally I am Brahman only. So sada soham. So then he went on his way. Then after that, the next day, the devotee, he saw, he has changed it now. So what to do? So what he did, he again wrote a da in front of it. So then it becomes dasa daso'ham. So I am the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's how it is. So although the Mayavadi philosophers may try to prove through the Upanishadic statement, Vedantic statement, that we are the same as the absolute truth, but ultimately it's the devotee who wins. So Dasa daso'ham, the ultimate conclusion of all philosophies is that we are the servants. Gopi bhardu padakamale or dasa dasanu dasaha. That is the perfect understanding of Vedantic philosophy. Proves our point. Okay, so the next section is purpose of Vedanta is not Advaita-vada or Mayavada. So although we have discussed a lot about it till now, we are going to read the comments of Srila Prabhupada, what he speaks in the lecture. So this is a lecture on Bhagavad Gita, given in 1972. So here the same thing, that tattva darshibhihi, those who are actual seer of the absolute truth, athata brahma jigyasa, as it is said in the Vedanta Sutra. Just yesterday, one boy was asking me, what is the Vedanta? Vedanta, what is the meaning of Vedanta? It is very nice. It is very easy. Veda means knowledge and Anta means ultimate. So Vedanta means ultimate knowledge. So ultimate knowledge is Krishna. Krishna says, vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha Vedanta krit veda videva chaham. He is the maker of Vedanta and he is the knower of Vedanta. Unless he is knower of Vedanta, how he can write Vedanta? Actually, Vedanta philosophy is written by Vyasadeva, incarnation of Krishna. So he is Vedanta krit and he is Vedanta vid also. Vedanta krit means one who compiled and Vedanta vid means one who knows. So unless he knows, how can he write? So the question was whether Vedanta means Advaita-vada or Advaita-vada. So it is very easy to understand. The first aphorism of Vedanta, athato brahma jigyasa, to inquire about Brahman, the absolute truth. Now to inquire where? If you want to inquire, you must go to somebody who knows the things. Therefore, immediately in the very beginning of the Vedanta Sutra, there is duality. That one must inquire and one must answer. There are two people. Athata Brahma Jigyasa. So in Vedanta Sutra, it is Advaita-vada. It is Dvaita-vada from the very beginning. Athata Brahma Jigyasa. One must inquire what is Brahman and one must reply, or the spiritual master or the disciple, that it is dual. How can you say it is Advaita-vada? So we have to study in this way. Here it is said, Tattva Darshibihi. Tattva Darshibihi means Vedanta with, one who knows Vedanta. Janmadasya yataha, one who knows the absolute truth, from where everything begins. Janmadasya yataha. That is the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the natural commentary of Vedanta Sutra is Srimad Bhagavatam. Jivasya Tattva Jigyasa. Jivasya Tattva Jigyasa. This is our life. Jivasya, of every living being. Every living being means especially human being. Because cats and dogs, they cannot inquire about Brahman or the absolute truth. Therefore, the conclusion is that the human form of life, one should not be engaged simply in the animal propensities of life. That is simple waste of time. He must inquire of the absolute truth, athato brahma jigyasa, and he must try to understand tad vidhi, tattvadarshibhihi, from the tattvadarshi, jnaninaha tattvadarshinaha. These are the words. Right. So this is a very important point. In Advaita philosophy, in Mayavada philosophy, or rather in the Vedic scriptures, it is mentioned that one must go and approach a guru and he must surrender onto him. And in Bhagavad Gita also it says that jnaninaha tattvadarshina. So one should go tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. So who is eligible to give instruction? One who is already realized. Is that jnani is tattvadarshibhi, is already in connection with the supreme absolute truth. That is what it means. And there are other statements in the Shruti also, which says that the disciple should approach a guru who is fully realized. Now the question, Sripad Ramanujacharya, he poses a question in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita to the Mayavadis. And he says that if the Guru is already realized, is already Brahman realized according to you, then how can he see a duality here when his disciple is in front of him? If there is no duality and you have already realized Brahman, then you should not be seeing somebody as ignorant. Correct? I hope you are able to follow. Because if everything is impersonal and the Guru and the disciple are actually the same person, there is no individuality, right? What does impersonalism mean? Impersonal means that everything is homogeneous. There is no individuality left. There is consciousness, but there is nothing to be conscious of. There is knowledge, but there is nothing existing through which one can gain knowledge. So there are three things when it comes to knowledge, right? There is one who gains, one who should accept knowledge, and there is a knowledge itself, and then the knowledge of that particular object. So there is this object, okay, the object is there and it is emitting some knowledge. Say it's the desk itself. No, it is emitting some knowledge to me. I can see that it is black in color. There are designs in orange around it. It has 4 legs. There's a drawer in it. This is knowledge about this particular desk, correct? So now this object is there and it possesses knowledge, or it possesses characteristics which I can know. So I am the knower, this is the object, and then there is the knowledge of the object also. So Vedanta means to understand these three things. But what the Mayavadis say is that there is no object, there is no knower, but there is only knowledge. How to understand this? Actually inconceivable, it cannot be understood. So according to them, there is no two people, there are no two people at all. There is not me, there is not you. Ultimately, there is only full total consciousness, that's all. So there's nothing else to understand. You just realize and then you destroy your identity. If you're not able to understand, that's actually good, because we are not meant to understand Advaita philosophy, but we are just making that argument that this is what they speak and this is what they say. Okay. So Ramanujacharya's point is that the Guru is totally realized. He is completely self-realized. Tattvadarshi is totally realized. And then the disciple is there. So the Guru should not be able to see a differentiation between the disciple and me, because there are no individuals. When they are speaking about Brahman, when we are speaking that I am that, daso'ham, tattvam asi, all these statements they make. So I am that. When you realize that you are Brahman, then your vision cannot be dual. You cannot see the other person as not Brahman. So he also is Brahman. You cannot see that person as an ignorant person. That is not allowed. So how is it that you are seeing him as ignorant? Okay. So the reply by the Advaita-vadis, the Mayavadis, is that this is because of badhita-anuvrtti, badhita-anuvrtti or badhita-vadis, they say this. And what it means is that although the spiritual master, the Guru, is realized, but still he know it is false, but still because of Vyavaharika statement, he does this particular act because it is given in the scriptures. Again, difficult to understand. And they give this example. They see, just like when we are going on the road during very hot sun, very hot atmosphere, then we see mirage, which looks just like water. But the person who has this knowledge that it's actually a mirage, it's not, and mirage means that it looks just like water. All of us would have experienced that. In a hot summer day when you're going on the road, you'll see that at a further distance, there is this water. It's called as mirage. So, Mayavadis reply that although he knows that it is mirage, but still he continues his journey. Although he knows that he's realized, but then because it's given in the scripture that he should do educate, he performs his duty like that. To this, Ramanujacharya replies, and he says, this is again a fallacious argument, because if the spiritual master already understands that it's illusion to see the disciple as ignorant, then there is no question of teaching that person. Just like when there is a mirage, although it's an illusion, you will not go and take water from there. Correct? It's mirage, it's an illusion, but then you will not go and try to take water from there, right? So your teaching of your disciple is actually taking water from that mirage. So although it's an illusion, but still you are instructing him, which actually should not be done, because that he is Brahman. And then when you are Brahman, you will not actually be seeing that disciple at all. You will all see everything as homogeneous as a single entity. So although it's an illusion and you claim all this badhita-anuvrtti and all, but still just like a person is not fool enough to go and try to take water from this mirage, Similarly, it's actually foolish for the Guru to teach his disciple because he is already self-realized. So therefore, your understanding of Vedanta and your following or your concept of self-realization itself is flawed from the start. The Guru who is actually teaching Advaita Vedanta philosophy is his disciple, he cannot be self-realized at all. That is the point. So the Guru can never be self-realized. He cannot be situated on the transcendental platform. He has to be lower than that, and he has to give him knowledge only theoretically. So Advaita Vedanta or Mayavad, it's only theoretical knowledge. There is no practical experience of bliss. Because they are going through those Advaita-vadis, Mayavadis who are very strict in their practices and all, there is some satisfaction and happiness because of the touch with this Brahman aspect. And we will see, this is acknowledged by Radha Damodar Goswami also. There is Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. So one who has little contact with Brahman or the understanding that everything is spiritual, then he is kind of liberated, or he comes out of these dualities of this material world. So he feels peace within himself. If he knows everything is material, and material means there is duality and everything is going to end up in suffering only, then he becomes detached from everything material, and then he situates himself only in transcendental knowledge. So that minuscule understanding of miseries of this material world and detaching oneself gives some sort of happiness or satisfaction. Okay, so only this much is what can be attained by the Mayavadis or the Advaita-vadis. They cannot have the transcendental bliss of associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is why Srila Prabhupada also writes here that Tattvadarshi means one who knows the absolute truth. And who knows the absolute truth? One who knows that Janmadisya, from whom all the creation emanates. And again, the Janmadisya also, it's proving the fact that there is one entity and then there is creation. So Janmadisya Anvyaditvarasateshu Abhigya Swarat. So his Abhigya, his Swarat also is completely independent. He's not dependent on the three modes of material nature. He's completely independent. And this independent entity, this independent Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of God, is actually doing the creation. So there is no duality, there is no homogeneous mixture of Brahman, and the Jiva never takes up the position of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So many, each and every statement, if we start analyzing like this, each and every statement, we will find that there is duality only. There's individuality. Duality means not that the Supreme Lord and the Jiva are totally disconnected from each other and they're two separate entities. There is connection also. At the same time, they are two different individual entities also. So this can be found out from each of these Upanishadic statements. Okay, so we'll continue. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 7, text 110, purport. The purpose of the discussions in the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra is to philosophically establish the personal feature of the absolute truth. The impersonalists, however, in order to establish their philosophy, accept these discussions in terms of lakshana-vritti or indirect meanings. Thus, instead of being tattva-vada or in search of the absolute truth, they become Mayavada or illusioned by the material energy. When Sri Vishnu Swami, one of the four acharyas of the Vaishnava cult, presented his thesis on the subject matter of Advaita-vada, immediately the Mayavadis took advantage of this philosophy and tried to establish their Advaita-vada or Kevala Advaita-vada. To defeat this Kevala Advaita-vada, Sri Ramanujara presented his philosophy as Vishishta-Advaita-vada, and Sri Madhvacharya presented his philosophy of Tattva-vada, both of which are stumbling blocks to the Mayavadis because they defeat their philosophy in scrupulous detail. Statements of Vedic philosophy know very well how strongly Sri Ramanujacharya's Vishishta-Advaita-vada and Sri Madhvacharya's Tattva-vada contest the impersonal Mayavad philosophy. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, accepted the direct meaning of the Vedanta philosophy and thus defeated the Mayavad philosophy immediately. He opined in this connection that anyone who follows the principles of Sharirika Bhashya is doomed. Now, this is a very interesting commentary by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He writes in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adi Khand, chapter 2, text 79, and he gives the history of Shankaracharya Sampradaya actually. How did this come about? Srila Prabhupada just gave an idea that the thesis of Advaita-vada of Sri Vishnu Swami, which again establishes that Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we should engage in devotional service to him, it was twisted. So what actually happened in the history? Now he writes, the acharyas of the Sri Rudra Sampradaya are known as Vishnu Swami because they preach pure devotional service. A few disciples of the Rudra Sampradaya gave up subordination to their spiritual master or the process of accepting knowledge through oral reception, and practiced adulterated devotional service. They then created a new sampradaya known as the Shivaswami Sampradaya. Sri Shankaracharya appeared in this Shivaswami Sampradaya and vigorously preached adulterated devotional service in this world. Since less intelligent people considered both pure and adulterated devotional service as the same, they were cheated from achieving eternal benefit. So, if you see, trace back the roots, then Shankaracharya actually appeared in that line of Rudra Sampradaya, but it was corrupted. It has already become an Upper Sampradaya called Shivaswami Sampradaya, and then that is going on from the last 1300 years around those many years. So that's why some scholars, or in fact many scholars, when they speak about parampara, they say Advaita Shankaracharya's line is also proper line only, and when we the Advaita-vadis, they actually say that our parampara originated from Narayana, and they give their line from Narayana. So which may be a fact, because it actually they belonged previously to Rudra Sampradaya, but because their teachings have been completely corrupted, they are actually not in the traditional Sampradaya, the 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas which are prominent in Kali Yuga, or which give perfect knowledge of the absolute truth. Then, this again in the same chapter, text 114, Vyasa composed a Vedanta Sutra to deliver the conditioned souls from this material world. But Shankaracharya, by presenting the Vedanta Sutra in his own way, has clearly done a great disservice to human society. For one who follows his Mayavada philosophy is doomed. In the Vedanta Sutra, devotional service is clearly indicated, but the Mayavadi philosophers refuse to accept the spiritual body of the Supreme Absolute Person and refuse to accept that the living entity has an individual existence separate from that of the Supreme Lord. So this is there in nutshell. This is the understanding of the Mayavadi philosophers. There are 2 things which they accept. They refuse to accept the spiritual body of Supreme Absolute Person. They think the Lord's form is Maya. So that's why they're called Mayavadis. And they also refuse to accept that the living entity has an individual existence separate from that of the Supreme Lord. So when we are speaking of Advaita-vada, we are speaking about contradictions in them. We are basically refuting these 2 arguments. Thus, they have created atheistic havoc all over the world, for such a conclusion is against the very nature of the transcendental process of pure devotional service. The Mayavadi philosophers' unrealized ambition to become one with the Supreme through denying the existence of the personality of Godhead results in a most calamitous misrepresentation of spiritual knowledge, and one who follows this philosophy is doomed to remain perpetually in this material world. So therefore, they are called avisuddha-buddhaya. So then, although they may be honored at first as very learned scholars, ultimately they descend to physical activities of politics, social work, etc. Instead of becoming one with the Supreme Lord, they again become one with these material activities. And this is prominent in current situation also. The followers of Shankaracharya's Sampradaya from Tamil Nadu, the most prominent mutt is the Kanchi mutt in Kanchipuram. And then there are other mutts also. Shringeri mutt is there. There is Dwarka mutt. Then there is Puri mutt also. I don't know what philanthropic activities they are involved in, but in Tamil Nadu at least you would have heard of the Shankara Netralaya, and the Shankara schools also are there. So all these things are started by the sannyasis who are actually in line of Shankaracharya. So Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, who was there, he was very strict. He was against that. But then his followers, I think Jayendra Saraswati and the current Shankaracharya, they are into this opening of Shankara Netralaya, opening of schools. There are Shankara schools also. So because they are not feeling that happiness, the Brahman bliss, so ultimately they have to resort down to doing mundane welfare, giving mundane education to people. They also run gurukulas, which are teaching traditional this thing just to maintain their sampradaya, just to maintain their pride. But then on the other hand, they are also giving all these different facilities, opening of hospitals, opening of mundane schools. So these things are going on. That's why Srila Prabhupada is also against opening the school which resorts to the mundane curriculum and not to the Vedantic principles. So these are the things that we are supposed to understand, that we should not become such that we also get into all this politics, social work, opening of hospitals, opening of schools and other things, because what it actually reflects or what it actually means is that we are not experiencing the bliss of Krishna consciousness. We are not experiencing the bliss of sharing this Krishna consciousness with others. We are not into preaching. We are not into the aspects of pure devotional service. And just to get some favors from mundane people, we are opening all these things so that we can have a good name. Although it may have been done with a good intention, Guru Maharaj speaks a lot about it, so I will not continue with this. Although they might be doing it with a good intention, but actually it's not in line with what our acharyas taught. So therefore, then it becomes a deviation. So, what's the purpose of Vedanta? So, it's a lecture. A real study of Vedanta is to know God. So, Prabhupada writes, he says the same thing. All these quotes, which we have already discussed in the previous references, this is what he speaks about. That all the acharyas have written notes on Vedanta, but Srimad Bhagavatam begins with the Vedanta Sutra, and Vedanta means to know God. That is the real study of Vedanta. So, Vedanta means to know the personality of Godhead, not the impersonal aspect. What is the purpose of Vedic literature? Veda means knowledge. Veda means knowledge. Veda vido jnanam. Anything from which you get knowledge, that is called Veda. So from the Vedas, we have to acquire the supreme knowledge. Therefore, it is called Vedanta. We have got so many different types of knowledge, but what is the ultimate knowledge? That is called Vedanta. And Prabhupada explains that we are inquiring about so many things. What is in the newspaper today? What has happened? But then that is not ultimate knowledge. Therefore, Krishna says, vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha. All ultimate knowledge means to understand Krishna. There's another aspect that he brings to this particular statement. Now, Veda can refer to the Vedic scriptures, but Veda actually means knowledge. So the knowledge that one gains, doesn't matter from whichever source it is, one has to understand Krishna at the ultimate end. So vedais sarvair, from all types of knowledge, one should understand Krishna. That's why Prabhupada also, in several of his conversations with his disciple, he used to say, oh, you want to be a scientist? You want to study this, that and all? Do that. But then use your science to push this Krishna consciousness movement. Use your science to establish that Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. Correct? So then that's why he instituted his Bhakti-Vedanta Institute was also there. Because through science, he instructed his disciple Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, he instructed that you should, through science, you should try to establish, or you should establish Krishna as the supreme absolute truth, and you should appeal to these scientists, who are totally into this mundane knowledge, totally into different technology and other things, but they do not have the understanding of what the ultimate end of knowledge is. So therefore, the Vedantic principles or Krishna consciousness should be propagated in the scientific community also, and science should be used to establish that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So that is the ultimate knowledge. So vedais sarvair ahameva vedyaha. Veda means this knowledge also. And just to extend it further, all this different material knowledge also is also sourced from Veda only. And there are books which have been written by both mundane scholars as well as devotees also, who actually trace back all the knowledge which we possess now into Vedic culture. So there are different, we say that the science of cosmology actually came from the Greeks, and before that it was the Babylonians, and so many other Western concepts are being propagated. So if you see how cosmology came into picture, then they'll trace back to that. But then if you trace back furthermore, these Greeks also, they got this knowledge from the Vedic scriptures, from the Vedic sages only. So then there are books which actually elaborate on that. So we don't have the scope of discussing all this here. But then there are traces which goes back to the Vedic version, to the Vedic culture. Most of the Vedic knowledge is lost. Srila Jiva Goswami mentions that around 94% of all the Vedic knowledge is lost, and only that knowledge remains which actually promote Krishna consciousness or the absolute truth. But it is understood that all the different types of materialistic knowledge that we see in this world now actually have been sourced from the Vedic literatures only. Although these sources of Vedas have been lost over a period of time because of different inquisitions and so many other things. But actually the knowledge which is spread all over the world, which we are actually using and we are attributing to these people, Western philosophers, actually originated from the Vedic literatures only. So those things are documented. So this Krishna consciousness movement means we are giving chance to everyone to come and inquire about Brahman, Athātu Brahma Jigyasa. Or in other words, the whole activities of this Krishna consciousness movement is Vedanta life. So the whole activities of this Krishna consciousness movement is Vedanta life. So we discussed that. Getting up early in the morning, Mangalarti and all those things that we do, from getting up early in the morning till we take rest, and then doing rest also. Everything is actually, we are following Vedanta philosophy. This is Vedanta life. So Krishna consciousness and Vedanta are actually not different. They are the same. And Krishna can be understood, the absolute truth can be understood, Vedanta can be understood only through the mercy of a devotee. Vedanti means to understand Krishna, but Vedeshu Durlabham. In Bharma Samhita, it's mentioned Advaitam Achyutam Anadi Mananta Rupam Atyam Purana Purusham Navayavanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So Vedeshu Durlabham, although from the Vedas it is very difficult to understand Krishna, but it becomes Adurlabham, or it becomes very easy by the mercy of a devotee, Atma Bhakto. So again, this is the point that Vedanta cannot be studied or cannot be understood in isolation. It has to be studied under the shelter of a guru and in parampara system. That is what it is. And he should be a devotee of the Lord. Atma Bhakta, he should be a devotee of the Lord. Only a devotee can explain Vedanta philosophy perfectly. So it has to come in that line. Then he says that Bhagavad Gita is the commentary on Vedanta. He says that if you simply understand what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you are a Vedantist. And what Krishna says, what does he say? He says, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam braja. Give up all rascaldom. So this is the ultimate conclusion. Okay, you understand Krishna from Veda, but then what are you supposed to do? You are supposed to give up all nonsense and surrender onto him. So Vedanta philosophy means surrender onto Krishna. Then Srila Prabhupada says, Bhakti Vedanta. Vedanta means bhakti. So these Mayavadi philosophers, they cannot understand. They think that Vedanta. In India, the Mayavadi sannyasis are known as Vedanti. Therefore, my society, Vaishnava society, has particularly given me this title, Bhakti Vedanta. Vedanta means bhakti. It's a challenge to the Mayavadi sannyasis. This particular title was given after due consideration that my humble self should be awarded this title. It is new title amongst the Vaishnava society. So the Mayavadi philosophers, they are sometimes surprised that how Swamiji is Vedanti, at the same time Bhakti, but actually they do not know Vedanta means Bhakti. Real Vedanta commentary is Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhashyam Brahma Sutranam. Brahma Sutra means this Vedanta Sutra. Right? So when we are discussing Vedanta, we are discussing through Bhakti Vedanta, through Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. That is what it means. Right. Then understanding Vedanta. So there are some aspects which are clarified in this purport. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 35. Lord Brahma is the first living being who directly learned the Vedic wisdom from the Lord. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kaviye. Therefore, who can be more learned Vedantist than Lord Brahma? He admits that in spite of his perfect knowledge in the Vedas, he was unable to know the glories of the Lord. Since no one can be more than Lord Brahma, how can a so-called Vedantist be perfectly cognizant of the absolute truth? The so-called Vedantist therefore cannot enter into the existence of the Lord without being trained in the matter of Bhakti Vedanta or Vedanta plus Bhakti. Vedanta means self-realization and Bhakti means realization of the personality of Godhead to some extent. No one can know the personality of Godhead in full, but at least to a certain extent. One can know the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, by self-surrender and the devotional attitude, and by nothing else. Right? So Jiva, even in his liberated state, cannot match the potency or cannot match the full understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He cannot match the understanding of Brahma. Of the Supreme Brahman, the absolute truth. So even in the liberated state, we cannot understand Krishna in completeness. It is not possible. But to a certain extent, one can know the absolute truth. And that is possible by these two things, self-surrender and a devotional attitude. So this is important. Only these two things should be there to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by nothing else, he says, nothing else will work. In Brahma Samhita also it is said, Vedeshu Durlabham. But the Lord is Durlabham Atma Bhakto, very easily available to his devotee. Vyasadeva therefore was not satisfied simply with compiling the Vedanta Sutras. But over and above this, by the advice of the spiritual master Narada, he compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam in order to understand the real import of Vedanta. Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, is the absolute medium by which to understand the absolute truth. So, Srila Vyasadeva, when he compiled the Vedanta Sutra, at that point, we can say he was just a Vedanti. But then after he compiled Srimad Bhagavatam also as a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, then in true sense, he became a Bhakti Vedanti at that time. So, he was also a Bhakti Vedanta. In fact, all devotees, all the Acharyas, although they may not have this official title of Bhakti Vedanta, actually they are Bhakti Vedantas. This Bhakti plus Vedanta. And Srila Vyasadeva is the original spiritual master. That's why we have Vyas Puja for our spiritual master, because he is the one who propagated this. He compiled the Upanishads as the ultimate knowledge, then he gave the Vedanta Sutras to defeat the other 5 philosophies, and then he also elaborated, or he gave us Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's Bhakti and Vedanta. It's not first Vedanta and then Bhakti. So Vedanta should be approached through Bhakti. So that's why it's Bhakti Vedanta. It's not Vedanti Bhakti. It's Bhakti Vedanta. Bhakti should come first. That understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the attitude to surrender to Him, to do devotional service to Him should come first. And through that, one can understand the Vedanta philosophy and situate himself perfectly in his spiritual practices. Another qualification that's required to acquire Vedanta knowledge is that one should be disgusted with the enjoyment of this material world. So this is one point which we agree with the Advaita-vadis also. Only one point. This is the only point. So we have to be detached from this material world. We should be disgusted with the enjoyment of this material world. Enjoyment in this material world is like eating of stool of a pig. Or rather, the pig eats stool, right? So when a pig eats stool, Shvavidvara Hoshtakare, Stamsuda Purusha Pushu, Rishabdev says in the 5th canto, 5th chapter, while instructing to his sons, that material enjoyment, sense gratification, is like enjoyment that a pig experiences when he eats stool. So that much disgust should be there with this material world. That no, this material world is totally horrible. I cannot have any happiness here. It's only full of miseries. There is always adhibaudik, adhyatmik, adhidevik. On top of that, there is birth, old age, disease, death. And entire life, anyone who tries to enjoy this material world actually only suffers, either through bodily or through psychologically, through his mind. So this material world is a place of suffering. One should have that perfect understanding. This is disgusting. Discussion, disgusted with the enjoyment of this material world. Okay. So Vedanta Sutra says, Athata Brahma Jigyasa. And human beings can understand that material world enjoyment is not there, but animals cannot understand. So this is applicable to all human beings. We saw this quote in few quotes back. The Vedanta Sutra is available as a Srimad Bhagavatam, the actual expression of Vedanta Sutra. This Bhagavad Gita is also Vedanta Sutra. By understanding Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedanta Sutra or Bhagavad Gita, one can obtain real knowledge. So Prabhupada writes, Bhagavad Gita is also Vedanta Sutra only. But then, then he says this rascaldom, which is propagated in the name of Vedanta. And he says that the fools of the present age, what they will understand, Vedanta Sutra, their life is so molded by the present atmosphere, materialistic atmosphere, that they are unable to touch Vedanta Sutra. They are unfit to touch even Vedanta Sutra, what to speak of understanding it. Therefore, they will create more rascaldom to create so many Vedanta societies, and they are the same rascals still. For 100 years, they are studying Vedanta Sutra, and the same thing, the same bad habit, same illicit connection, same intoxication, same gambling, everything is going on. And they are Vedanta student, Vedanta Sutra student. This is rascaldom. So, any guesses who is referring to? To Ramakrishna's mission, to Vivekananda. They have been studying from that time onwards. Vivekananda went to US with that and all, and they have been studying so-called Vedanta Sutra, but they eat meat, and it has also come out that the sannyasis also have illicit connection. So many things are still going on. So although they claim themselves to be sannyasis, they are eating meat. So they are not even Advaita-vadis in the true sense of the term. Because traditional Advaita means they will follow the principles very perfectly. So the so-called, they are rascals. The so-called, they are studying Vedanta Sutra, but then they can speak on Vedanta Sutra, but they cannot experience the life of Vedanta. So there must be change in life. Otherwise, what is the use of Vedanta Sutra? Vedanta means, Veda means knowledge, Anta means end. Again, he explains the same thing. And he says that if you simply understand what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you are a Vedantist. And what Krishna says, what he says Saradharman Parityaja. You give up all rascaldom, simply surrender on it. This is Vedanta. Aradito yadi haris tapasa tata kim. So I think this is the final section before we get into this work. So pure devotional service is the goal of all Vedantic study. So Srila Prabhupada writes about this in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text 12. But that misconception of self-identity diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of God Vasudeva through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. So we are more concerned with the purport here. So Srila Prabhupada writes that as discussed in the first canto, because the application of devotional service to Lord Vasudeva invites pure knowledge, it quickly detaches one from the material conception of life and thus revives one's normal condition of spiritual existence even in this life, and frees one from the material winds which cause one to quiver. So he is referring to this verse from Canto 1, Chapter 2. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahitukam. So one who renders devotional service unto Lord Vasudeva, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, and he is engaged in Bhakti Yoga to Vasudeva, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What happens? Janayatyashu Vairagyam. So people very quickly attain Vairagya, detachment from this material world, and Jnanam Chayat Ahitukam. And Ahituki knowledge is developed, or it illuminates within the heart of that particular devotee. So detachment from this material world will automatically come if one is sincerely and strictly practicing the concepts of pure, the process of pure devotional service. The attitude of detachment should be there, but then one should not become a dry renunciant. So this also is there in, I don't remember the purport, but there's a purport in which Srila Prabhupada writes this. We discussed it actually in Bhagavatam class, I think a couple of months back. That renunciation should not, we should not become rigid in renunciation. The attitude of renunciation should be there. We should try to detach ourselves from this material enjoyment, but then the help comes from devotional service. So our way of detachment is actually, the way of devotional service leads to detachment. Devotional service itself, bhakti itself is so potent and it's so relishable that one who's actually experiencing Krishna consciousness, the bliss of Krishna consciousness, the bliss of performing service in Krishna consciousness, he will naturally be detached from this material world. So that automatically happens. One does not have to cultivate dry renunciation, saying, okay, I will do renunciation and bhakti will go side by side. This is a kind of misconception that devotees may have, that the focus should be on renunciation and bhakti will go side by side. That's what we are supposed to do. But no, our idea, or as Srimad Bhagavatam says, by performing devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, detachment automatically arises. It automatically comes. Knowledge automatically arises. So bhakti is the superseding factor. Just like it is said, bhakti is independent. Bhakti sanjayate bhakti. So bhakti comes from bhakti only. By renunciation, bhakti cannot be attained. Just by gaining transcendental knowledge, bhakti cannot be attained, or one cannot become a pure devotee. But by performing the process of pure devotional service, one can attain detachment from this material world as well as transcendental knowledge also. So what it basically suggests, or what it basically means, or the implied understanding is that we are studying Vedanta philosophy, we are studying Srila Prabhupada books, and that study itself is an act of devotion. Because when Prabhupada writes all his purports, when the acharyas have given their commentaries on different books, they have written their works, studying those work itself is our dedication and our willingness to surrender onto the thoughts and what the Goswamis want to give us, what the acharyas want to give us, what Srila Prabhupada wants to give us. By studying their works, we are basically dedicating our life to them. We are employing our mind, our intelligence, our consciousness in understanding what they have given us. So studying these books itself is an act of devotion. Attending Srimad Bhagavatam class is an act of devotion. So because this devotion, it gives, it serves all the purposes. It gives transcendental knowledge, it leads to detachment from this material world. At the same time, we are also making progress and devotional service. So that's why it said, no, Bhagavatam should be heard, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Nityam Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam should be studied, you know, every moment actually. And the consciousness should be tuned like that. So only knowledge and devotional service can elevate one towards the path of liberation. The development of knowledge for the purpose of knowing everything without rendering devotional service is considered fruitless labor, and one cannot get the desired result by such a labor of love. Lord Vasudeva is pleased by devotional service only, and thus his mercy is realized by association with pure devotees of the Lord. Pure devotees are transcendental to all material desires, including the desire for results of fruitive activities and philosophical speculation. If one wants to acquire the mercy of the Lord, one has to associate with pure devotees. Such association alone can by degrees release one from the querying elements. Okay, then here, you know, this is a very nice verse which elaborates, or which is like conclusive. It's conclusive of what we have discussed till now. The seriously inquisitive student of sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from Vedanta Shruti. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress, and without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless therefore devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. Assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literatures, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called Samadhi. Right? So Vedic literatures, Vedanta, must be studied. And in the purport to Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 16, Srila Prabhupada writes, the knowledge imparted by Shukdev Goswami onto Maharaj Parikshit helped him attain the service of the Lord. And this stage of perfection is called Apavarga, or the perfect stage of liberation. Simple knowledge of liberation is material knowledge. So just the knowledge of liberation, which does not lead to service of the Lord, it's only material knowledge. And in Vedanta Sutra, again in this purport, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 32, Srila Prabhupada writes, this is the last sutra of Vedanta Sutra. Okay, so this is Vedanta Sutra 4.4.22. Anavrtti Shabdat, liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation begins from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna. Our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound with spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. And this sound is the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Right? So this is the ultimate, as Prabhupada wrote, we discussed yesterday, that one should come to the perfect understanding, and in this Trinadapi Sunichena, Darurapya Savishuna, Amanina Maradena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Srila Prabhupada writes, this Kirtaniya Sadahari means one can chant the Vedanta philosophy or the holy names of the Lord. So Vedanta philosophy is ultimately to come to the understanding that we have to chant the holy names of the Lord, and that way we make progress. Okay, so I'll stop here. From tomorrow, we'll be actually getting into this text and hopefully we'll progress from there on. So if you have any questions, you can, I think we have only 1 minute. Yes, Prabhu. Yes. 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 Okay. Okay. So the question is that in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that Tattva, Vadanti Tattva-vidas, Tattvam Yadjnanamadvayam, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdati. So the absolute truth can be realized in these three features, in these three phases: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So when the impersonalists are speaking about Brahman, that is also a path of purification only. That's also a part of absolute truth realization. So why are we decrying them, or why are we denigrating them? Correct? Is that the question? Yes. So this is explained by Srila Prabhupada also, and if you read Prabhupada's books, it's mentioned that, see, for the impersonalists are offenders. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls the Mayavadis as offenders because they say that they exclude the absolute. See, there are three features of the absolute truth. So absolute truth is only one. Okay, it's Advayam. Vadanti tattva-vidas tattvam yadganam Advayam. So it's only one, but then he's realized in three phases. Okay, so the example that Srila Prabhupada gives is that of the sun. Now the sun is there and the effulgence of the sun is there. Now one may be understanding only the effulgence of the sun. He may not have any understanding of the sun disk. Now sun disk, the understanding of sun disk is that the understanding of Paramatma. And then to understand that there's a personality in sun globe and that he has his activities and other things, that is the understanding of Bhagavan feature. So he is giving an analogy like this. Mayavadi's problem is that they do not accept the Paramatma feature and the Bhagavan feature of the Lord. And they attribute that the Paramatma feature and the Bhagavan feature of the Lord is actually tinged with Maya. They are not spiritual. So because of that, they are actually offenders to the Lord. They do not say that Brahman has these three features. That is not their understanding. And the proper understanding is that, proper Brahman understanding also is that Brahman, the effulgence is there, but the living entities never merge or never become one with that effulgence. But their claim is that the living entities will become one with Brahman. They will understand that they are Brahman, and then all the illusion is removed, to the exclusion of the Paramatma feature and the Bhagavan feature. So Paramatma feature is primarily for the creation of this material world, and Bhagavan feature is the Leela that he performs in the spiritual world. So they do not attribute. So when Paramatma is not influenced by the material creation. He is not under the three modes of material nature. He is transcendental. And what do the Mayavadis say? That when Paramatma is being spoken about in the scriptures, he is also influenced by the three modes of material nature, which is an offense. Because actually Paramatma is not influenced. So their understanding of Paramatma is incorrect. Then Bhagavan, they say when the Lord comes in spiritual form as an incarnation, they will not say Lord, they say when Brahman comes in the form of incarnation, Brahman descends down, then he takes a material form. So Krishna's form, when Krishna incarnates, Krishna comes down to this material world, Ramachandra comes down to this material world, Nrsimhadev comes to the material world. They say this is all Maya. These forms are actually not spiritual, these forms are Maya only. Because in spiritual realm, there is no form. There are no form, there are no qualities, there is no individuality, nothing is there. What exists is Brahman, who is pure consciousness. There is consciousness, but there is nothing to be conscious of. There is no other object. There is no duality. So because they have this convoluted understanding, they are basically decrying the personality of Godhead. It's like an insult to him. If I come and talk to you, and then I completely decry that you have a personality, you have an individuality, your qualities, your characteristics. If I keep on decrying all these things, say everything is bogus, everything is nonsense, you do not have a head, you do not have a hand, you do not have legs, you will feel offended, right? So it's an offense to the Lord to say that his transcendental bodily form, his transcendental features are actually completely Maya. They're completely temporary. They're completely useless. Because the impersonalistic understanding itself is that one should get disgusted from this material world and everything that is in this realm of the three modes of material nature. And they also say that the Lord's form is made up of, is influenced by the three modes of material nature. What it basically means that if you correlate these two, you should get disgusted with the form of the Lord. Right? It amounts to that, although they may not say it openly, but their philosophy leads us to that conclusion. So therefore it's totally bogus. It's totally nonsense. How is it possible that the transcendental form of the Lord, and you can say that it is all material? So because they are doing this offense, and they are taking people away from their actual Swarupa. Jivera Swarupa hai Krishna Nityadas. The Jiva Swarupa is to be a servant of the Lord. But then if we do not even accept Paramatma feature, forget Bhagavan feature, where is the question of service? So the Jiva Swarupa is not realized. One does not get liberated and situate himself in his actual Swarupa. He is not serving the Lord. So just going to the Brahman feature, because he's not serving the Lord, that is not his Swarupa, even after attaining Brahman feature, he falls down again into this material world. We will see that, there's this verse that Lord Brahma speaks in the 10th canto, 14th chapter. Ye anne arvidaksha vimuktamayana toyista bhava avisuddha-buddhaya aruya krishna parampadam tata patanti adho anadita yushmadanugraya. So one who does not render service onto the lotus feet of the Lord, and is speaking only about Brahman, although through his practices, if he is not offensive to the personality of the Lord, he may be able to achieve Brahman realization. But from that realization also, he has to fall down to material realization, because his nature is to serve. Either he is serving the Supreme Lord, he is serving his devotees in the spiritual realm, or he has to serve people in this material world. Because service or doing seva is the eternal swarupa of the living entity. So because they decry all this devotional concepts, everything is thrown out. It's only impersonal Brahman, gain transcendental knowledge and attain Brahman peace. Understand, will not even say attain. They'll say you realize that you are that. So when we say that they are speaking or merging into Brahman, they'll say no, there is no merging into Brahman, because that means that I am an individual and I'm merging, I'm going somewhere and there's location transfer to that Brahman. They'll say no, it's not, we are not talking about merging. We're talking about realizing. We realize that we are Brahman and that's about it. It's all speculative. It's all in the mind. It's all in the mind, no? Because we cannot realize. We can realize that we are Brahman, but as an insignificant Brahman. And there is Para-Brahman also. There is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is Krishna. And we are supposed to render service unto him, because that is what is claimed and that is what is elaborated on the Vedanta Sutras as well as the Upanishads and all the Puranas also. So there is duality. We cannot give up duality. And because Mayavadis, they do not take a Paramatma and Bhagavan feature of the Lord, their understanding of Brahman is also convoluted, it's corrupted. So it's an offense. So that way, that is how it is. Okay, so it's quite late, so we'll stop here. Shri Radha Damodar Goswami ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.